Hello, dear students, and a very warm welcome to today's class. I hope you're all doing wonderfully and are ready to learn something truly impactful today. We are going to dive deep, literally and figuratively, into a fascinating chapter from your Class 12 CBSE English syllabus. It's called Deep Water, and it's by William O. Douglas. Now, I want to be clear right from the start. This isn't just some simple story about a boy learning to swim. No, it's a profoundly moving autobiographical piece. It explores the absolute, gripping psychology of fear, how it can completely suffocate our lives, and, most importantly, the sheer, incredible human willpower it takes to conquer it. So sit back, maybe keep your textbooks open, and treat this explainer as your live classroom summary. We're going to navigate the emotional depths of this narrative together, so you understand every single nuance for your exams.
But quickly, before we plunge into the water, a tiny reminder. Please don't forget to hit that like button, share this with your classmates, and subscribe to the ACE Archive YouTube channel. Subscribing makes sure you get all these easy, structured explanations for your Class 12 English chapters right on your feed. It really helps us keep bringing this live classroom experience straight to your screens.
All right, let's look at our roadmap for today. First, introduction and the author. Second, core themes and settings. Third, the YMCA misadventure. Fourth, overcoming the terror. Fifth, key literary devices. And finally, conclusion and final takeaways. Okay, starting off with Section 1, Introduction and the author William O. Douglas.
So, William O. Douglas had a genuinely illustrious life. After finishing his Bachelor of Arts in English and Economics, he actually spent 2 years teaching high school in Yakima. That's right, he was a teacher just like me. But, he eventually grew a bit tired of it and made a massive career shift into law. He went on to become a leading advocate for individual rights, and get this, he remains the longest-serving justice in the entire history of the United States Supreme Court. Quite the resume, right? Now, for your exams, it is absolutely crucial to remember that this chapter, Deep Water, is actually an excerpt. It's taken from his much larger autobiographical book called Of Men and Mountains. He uses his own very personal near-death experience to talk about the universal concept of fear. Moving right along to Section 2, Core Themes and Settings, Understanding the Fear.
Now I want you to pay very, very close attention to this quote. Please mark it in your books. In death, there is peace. There is terror only in the fear of death. Douglas learns this profound truth the absolute hard way. The core theme of this entire chapter is the contrast between the actual reality of a situation and the psychological terror our own minds construct around it. Often, the fear itself is so much worse, so much more paralyzing than the event we are afraid of. Keep this thought right at the front of your mind as we follow his journey today.
Let's quickly set the scene. The Yakima River was notoriously dangerous. It was treacherous. His mother continuously warned him against going there, making sure to keep the tragic details of every single drowning fresh in his young mind. So, naturally, young Douglas decided that if he was going to learn to swim, he'd do it at the YMCA pool. It was considered very safe, just a gradual drop from 2 or 3 feet at the shallow end down to 9 feet at the deep end.
But students, to really understand his phobia, we have to trace it back to its absolute root. The fear didn't actually start at the YMCA pool. It started in early childhood. When he was just 3 or 4 years old, his father took him to a beach in California. He was just standing there in the surf, holding on to his dad, when these massive waves suddenly knocked him down and completely swept over him. He was buried in water. He couldn't breathe. And while his father just laughed because, an adult knows there's no real danger in the shallow surf, the little boy felt a profound, overpowering terror grab his heart. That right there, that was the tiny seed of his lifelong phobia.
Let's move on to the climax in Section 3, the YMCA misadventure, the plunge into terror.
Picture this. Douglas is now about 10 or 11 years old. He's sitting all alone by the YMCA pool, feeling timid, just waiting for the others to arrive before getting in. Suddenly, this 18-year-old boy walks in. Douglas describes him as a big bruiser with beautiful rippling muscles. This boy yells out, "Hi, Skinny, how'd you like to be ducked?" And without a single second thought, he picks up the fragile, skinny young Douglas and tosses him right into the 9-foot deep end. It was an instant of complete shock and absolute helplessness.
Now, even in the middle of this sheer panic, Douglas's mind was actually racing. He formulated a desperate survival strategy on the way down. Step 1, wait until his feet hit the tiled bottom. Step 2, summon every ounce of strength and make a massive jump upwards. Step 3, come to the surface and lie flat. And Step 4, paddle safely to the edge. Sounds like a pretty logical plan, right? But as he was sinking, those 9 feet felt more like 90. His lungs felt like they were going to absolutely burst.
When he finally hit the bottom and jumped with all his might, he didn't shoot up to the surface like a cork, like he hoped. Instead, he came up agonizingly slowly. He opened his eyes, and what did he see? Nothing but dirty, yellow water. He flailed, he choked, and as he started to sink down for a second time, his legs became completely paralyzed and rigid. They hung there like dead weights. Now, students, this is a key phrase for your exams. Memorize this. Stark terror took an even deeper hold on me. It's a kind of terror that defies understanding, a rigid, freezing panic where even the screams stuck in his throat were frozen solid.
Going down for the third time, all his struggling just stopped. The panic completely evaporated, and it was replaced by this strange, drowsy peacefulness. A deep blackness swept over his brain, and it wiped out the fear entirely. He felt like he was being wrapped in tender arms, just like his mother's. As Douglas writes so beautifully, I crossed to oblivion, and the curtain of life fell. He had blacked out. He was actually experiencing that peacefulness of death he reflects on later. He was only saved because someone managed to pull him out and revive him right there beside the pool.
Naturally, the aftermath of this near-death experience was just devastating. For days, he was weak and trembling, just crying on his bed. Even the slightest physical exertion made his knees wobbly. But the long-term trauma? That was far worse. A haunting, deep-seated fear took permanent residence in his heart. As he grew up, this severe handicap completely robbed him of the simple joys of life. It completely ruined his fishing trips for landlocked salmon in Maine and trout on the Deschutes in the Cascades. He couldn't enjoy canoeing, boating, or swimming, because the moment he tried, that icy horror would rush back and paralyze his legs all over again.
But there's a turning point. Section 4, Overcoming the Terror, the Return of Courage.
Finally, one October, he decided he had simply had enough. He wasn't going to live like this anymore. So, he hired an instructor to systematically dismantle his fear. This instructor was brilliant. He put a belt around Douglas, attached it to a rope that ran through a pulley on an overhead cable. This gave him a much-needed safety net. Hour after hour, day after day, they went back and forth across the pool. Gradually, the sheer panic began to slacken. Then came the breathing exercises, putting his face underwater to exhale, raising it to inhale. They repeated this hundreds of times. Then they simply practiced kicking at the side of the pool until his previously paralyzed legs finally started to obey his commands. The instructor quite literally built a swimmer, piece by piece.
By April, the instructor declared his job done. But for Douglas, his own personal test was only just beginning. He had to be absolutely sure the fear was totally eradicated. So, he designed his own final victory process. First, he swam the pool completely alone. Tiny echoes of the old terror would try to return, but now, he could just frown at them and keep swimming. Next, he escalated to real, unpredictable waters. He dived off a dock at Triggs Island. And finally, the ultimate test. He swam a full 2 miles across Lake Wentworth. When a miniature wave of fear tried to creep back while he was in the middle of that bottomless lake, he just laughed and said out loud, "Well, Mr. Terror, what do you think you can do to me?" The fear fled. He had finally, completely conquered it.
All right, students, let's get very practical here. Section 5, Key Literary Devices, Exam Focus.
I want you to take a screenshot of this or jot this table down immediately. Understanding these will help you fetch full marks in your long answer questions. First, we have a simile. Douglas says he thought he would bob to the surface like a cork, using the word like to compare his hopeful buoyancy to a light object. Second, metaphor. The curtain of life fell. Here he is directly comparing losing consciousness and almost dying to a theater curtain dropping heavily at the end of a play. Third, personification. Icy horror grabbed my heart. He's taking the abstract, invisible feeling of horror and giving it the human action of physically grabbing him. And fourth, repetition. I went down, down endlessly. Repeating the word down beautifully and tragically emphasizes the agonizing length and utter helplessness of his sinking. Make sure you use these examples in your answers.
And that brings us to Section 6, Conclusion and Final Takeaways.
This entire journey is what we in literature call a hero's journey. Look at the contrast. In the past, Douglas was paralyzed, rigid, held hostage in the suffocating grip of stark terror. He was surviving, but he wasn't truly living. But by facing that fear incredibly methodically and with sheer, stubborn willpower, look at his present. He feels released. He is finally free to walk the mountain trails, climb the peaks, and just brush aside his fear. He proves to all of us that turning around and facing your terror directly is the only true path to emotional and psychological freedom.
And so I want to leave you with this final thought today. We all have our own deep waters. For some of you listening right now, it might be the fear of failure, or maybe the looming anxiety of these very board exams. But I want you to remember Douglas's most important lesson. The terror is only in the fear of the event, not the event itself. So gather your courage, break your big challenges down piece by piece, just like the instructor did, and you too will brush aside your fear. Thank you so much for joining today's Explainer. Keep studying hard, stay confident, and I will see you in the next class. Take care.